Today, I'm going to show you how, in a more basic demonstration, how I painted my painting of a boo, which was a 3-hour long project. And in today's tutorial, I just want to show you the basics of how to paint luminous black skin, how to mix black skin. I want to say thank you to Karen Sturzenegger for her beautiful picture of a boo who lives in Zanzibar. I am painting this on Fabriano Artistico, so that is my first bit of advice, is to use good paper for this approach to painting, which is lots of layers, lifting, and using non-staining paints, which I'll tell you about in a minute. I'm using Fabriano Artistico here for this demonstration, but normally I would suggest using Arches Cold Press 140 pound or Hahnemühle the Collection, which is what I painted the studio version of a boo, which I did a demonstration on my Patreon. My brushes, I would suggest, this is my Silver Black Velvet 3/4 oval, and it's soft and it covers a lot of ground. So when you first start, you're going to do an underpainting that's going to be larger. And so and then in subsequent phases, you're going to go in, you're going to let everything completely dry and then put clear, clean water over what you painted, which will be thick layers of paint that are easy to move and reactivate. So you want a soft brush, and this is the perfect brush for that. A mop brush would also work, but I like this because I can get more detail because of the point it has. Other brushes that I like are an 8 round Silver Black Velvet, a smaller size 2 Silver Black Velvet. I have an angled shader, which is a acrylic painting brush, and it's stiffer, and I use this for when the paint is dried. I use it to lift out highlights. This is a stiff scrubber for paper, like if you're using Arches, you can use a stiff scrubber. If you're using more delicate papers like Hahnemühle, you need a soft scrubber. This is also a soft scrubber by Royal & Langnickel. They make stiff scrubbers and soft scrubbers. So if you're working with, for example, hot press or more delicate paper, you want soft scrubbers. So those are the main brushes that I rely on for a painting like this. Now, the colors I use are also important because I use non-staining or mostly non-staining paints, because the way I work is to paint a lot of darks and then lift out the highlights. And you can't lift out highlights very well if you use a staining paint like phthalo blue, a lot of reds. Winsor Violet is pretty staining, although I did use a lot of Winsor Violet in this painting, grouping of paints, but I used Winsor Violet in this painting, which is the most staining paint, French Ultramarine, M. Graham Naphthol Red, which if you've watched my shorts, I've done little demonstrations on how it diffuses, and it's just a powerful color that on wet paper will just spread out. That's called diffusion. And it makes for beautiful glowing skin effects, but it's a very powerful paint, so you got to be careful with it. Burnt sienna is the basis of dark skin, the way I paint it anyway, and it's non-staining and it lifts beautifully. And normally I use Holbein Aureolin as my yellow, and I'm out. And the yellow in this painting was not very important. I didn't use a lot of yellow, so I just grabbed my quinacridone gold in case I need to demonstrate some yellow for you all. I am going to, I believe I already have some French Ultramarine. Let's just make sure. Yeah, that's definitely French Ultramarine. I recommend using paints like this on your palette that have dried and then reactivate them as you need them, because the way I'm going to do it for this demonstration with wet paint out of the tube is it's clumpy, and you really will have to mix it a lot to get the clumps out and make it really a nice even mix. So I don't like to work with paint straight from the tube. However, for this demonstration, I wanted to show you the colors I was using, so I made an exception. Here's my burnt sienna. I'm going to need a lot of burnt sienna. Pretend this is Holbein Aureolin, which is my oh gosh, I haven't used, you can see I haven't used that in a while. And then a little bit of Winsor Violet. In the original painting, my first step was to do a tea consistency underpainting of Winsor Violet to tie everything together. For the benefit of this tutorial, I am just going to paint his skin. So the first thing that you're gonna do is get just the area you want to paint wet with clean, clear water. And I'm putting almost puddling, because by the time I get back to this area, it will have soaked in a little bit, because I'm going to get my paper wet And I have a little bit of pigment in my brush, and I'm going to put a little more pigment because that way you guys can see where I'm getting wet. And I'm going to paint right over everything, right up to my boundaries. And this is burnt sienna tea, very, very watery tea consistency. If there are pure white highlights in the skin you're painting, leave those completely dry. Like I could leave a little flash of white on his nose somewhere, and that would be really pretty. But I do want to make this a simplified version just to give you the basic recipe for how to paint lots of different paintings of a black person. All right, so this is very wet, almost puddling, and you want this water to be even. You don't want puddles, I'm not saying that, but I'm letting it soak into the paper and get to buckling stage. I have videos about buckling paper, different stages of water on paper and different things you can do at those different stages. It's a whole thing. I will link a video here in the upper right hand corner. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do, I think I'm gonna actually put in some aggressively dark first. So I'm gonna get some French ultramarine. French ultramarine mixed with burnt sienna makes a gorgeous dark. And in order for, I like to call this my map. And while I can still see my pencil lines, I map in the main components. And in fact, I should have done that on dry paper, really. But really what I want to map in is the darks around his ear. So, because I always lose the ear. And this is going to get really dark. And I'm going to lose my ability to see my line drawing underneath. So I like to map in and see this is cream consistency. It does not run. I've got a whole video on cream consistency paint and what you can do with it. I'll link that here. I will probably run out of opportunities to link because I can only link 5 videos, but I've got videos on milk tea cream consistency paint, and they're just basic important things to know if you're a beginner. So be sure to watch those. They're very useful. And you can do different things with different consistencies of paint. Okay, so this is starting to buckle. You can even see it buckling. That is the time when you want to go in with your cream consistency. I think I'm going to even add a little bit more blue for a blacker color. And because this is really wet, when I put my paint in, it kind of blends itself on the edges. And also notice that if I paint a stroke and I lift my brush up, it kind of will bloom out. It didn't do it that time because this paint is so thick, but normally when you're painting with cream consistency on wet paper like this, you want to keep your brush moving along the edges, and if you lift it up, the paint will explode out the end of your brush and kind of make a bit of an explosion. And if you don't want that, then just be aware that that will happen. And this is all really dark in here. And because my paper is so wet, it's kind of blending itself for this first layer. You'll be amazed at how light this will lighten up. So I'm just mapping in the super darks, which usually in watercolor you hear, don't paint your darks first, paint your lights first, but I like to map in my darks. You got to do it with a bit of control, and one way to have control on wet paper is to use cream consistency heavy paints. And French ultramarine and burnt sienna are pretty heavy, so they stay pretty well in the place that you put them. And if they don't, you can fix it. And here's another dark area. So I'm carefully painting in my darks on wet, very wet paper. And if it starts drying, I'm going to stop because I want it to blend itself. And this is the other part of the nose that I really want to make sure. Not going to do the tip. The tip is beautiful and red, so I want to make sure that I get that. You might lose control if you are a beginner. You might get too much blooming. Your paint might be too wet or your paper might be too wet. And I would encourage you to practice these techniques on a piece of scrap paper or a study, a small study like this. This is only like 5 by 5.5 inches. And see, this is getting a hard edge. I can see it's not blending itself. I'm gonna clean out my brush, dampen it, and I'm gonna rub it along this edge to blend it out. And this is almost dry, so that tells me I need to let this dry. That's about as far as I'm gonna get. I'm gonna kind of soften this edge too. And this size 4 round is really just the thing. You can also, when it's half damp like this, go in with a thirsty brush. I'm gonna clean out my brush. I'm gonna wring it out, and then I can lift out. I can clean up the edge of this ear while it's damp. All right, blot my brush. And this is a little wet, that little triangle of light. I'm gonna put a little tiny dot of water, wring out my brush, and then sop it right back up so I can still see that little triangle of ear. I'm sure that ear area has a name. But I don't know what it is. So I'm just kind of babysitting my edges around the ear so I don't lose my ear. But if you do, it's really not a big deal. After everything dries, you can go in with a wet lifting brush like this and scrub it and blot it. And I will show you that. I'm gonna let this completely dry because it's at that stage where if I put a fingerprint in here, the fingerprint would show up. And that means it's in the cauliflower stage. And I did a whole video on the cauliflower stage. Really important to understand too if you're a beginner, what is a cauliflower stage in watercolor, because it can be a beautiful time, but it can also be a dangerous time, and you need to understand it if you're watching this as a beginner. So be sure to check that video out. I will link it up in the right corner for you. And I'm gonna go dry this with a hairdryer. All right, while we let this dry, let's admire the beautiful orchid. This is reblooming. I just noticed yesterday that it was getting new blooms, which is very exciting to me. And I want to give a little love note to my beginners out there who might be watching this and probably scared to death of this whole process, because I'm going to give you a little love note, and that is don't freak out when you get little mistakes like this. See this little oops? First of all, let these oops happen. See how there's a little mini dinosaur scale coming out of his back neck, and that happens. I would suggest paint everything, get everything done, and because there will be a lot of other ones of those, and it's better to just fix them all at the same time. I never do, they always bug me. What I'm gonna do is take my angled shader. Depending on your paper, you might need a stiff scrubber. You might need a soft scrubber. It depends what you are working with. And you need a little piece of tissue to blot. And this needs to be completely bone dry. And actually, I don't ever use this Fabriano Artistico paper. That's why I used it for this demo, because I don't care about it. So I don't know how it lifts. So I'm about to find out too, how this particular paper lifts. Every paper is different. I'm gonna dip my angled shader in my water, just the tip. I'm not gonna have too much water, okay? I can even blot it out. I don't want it puddling. I'm gonna dab, dab, dab at this little mistake, okay? And then I'm gonna go boop, voila, look, it's gone, okay? Say you want this a different color, let everything completely dry, and then you can do a glaze over the entire thing, which we're gonna do in a minute. I'll show you later anyway. And you can kind of blend it and make it kind of disappear even more. So don't freak out when you make little mistakes like that, dear little beginner watercolor artist. They say watercolor is not fixable. It's so fixable. The secret to fixable watercolor is using non-staining paints. This is exactly why I like to use non-staining paints. If I had phthalo blue in here, that would be a hot mess. I could not have done that. And also, I could not have done that on cheap paper. A lot of papers. Actually, the Hippie Crafter paper that I keep telling you guys about, and the links to my favorite supplies are in the description. The Hippie Crafter paper will let you lift especially thicker paint like this. You just be delicate. Use a soft, do not use a stiff scrubber on that paper. Let's do the second stage. This has got to be bone dry, okay? Bone dry. Now let's put in the burnt sienna underpainting. So fun to do this. All right, so we're gonna get all of Abu's face, everything, this whole area wet with clean, clear water again, and you can do that. You do want to use a bit of a soft brush because this thick paint will reactivate on you a little bit. So you don't want to be like, you don't want to scrub at it. Just, you know, softly put water on it and then don't go over it again because it will reactivate, but that will also help it soften and look more blended too, which your paint might need. And a little bit of reactivation is not a big deal. I'm painting right over that ear. I'm painting over everything with clean, clear water, his whole face. And if you have an edge that's important, change the direction of your paper so you can see the tip of your brush and where it's going along this edge, and be careful. But just know if you do make mistakes, and I make mistakes in every single painting I have to fix. That's just how watercolor is. The basic approach to painting a watercolor is put something down, see how you like it, and adjust and fix. So you need to learn how to fix paintings. And there's so many YouTube tutorials out there about it, and I've got some too. If I can link it here, I will. How to fix basic fixing techniques for watercolor. Maybe I need to do an update video. Okay, now I want to put in my burnt sienna, pure, beautiful burnt sienna. So I'm gonna go more milk consistency. In a nutshell, real quick, because I do have other videos about what milk consistency paint is. It means you mix enough water in it so when you tip it up, it beads at the bottom like that, but doesn't run readily. It is running, but not readily, like tea consistency would. Okay, so it's very simple. It's not complicated jargon. So you can even add a little bit more paint to make it even more thick. And we want it pretty thick because Abu has some beautiful dark skin. While I'm at it, I'm gonna get a little puddle going of some red. So I'm gonna get my beautiful M Graham Naphthol red ready. In fact, I could put it in now on this wet paper. Look, his nose is already dry. It's not blooming out. So I'm gonna go in with more clean, clear water and get this re-wetted. Is that a word? No, probably not. And his lips are gonna have a red underpainting. We can tone that down later if we want to. It's got this beautiful like poof at the bottom of his lip. I just love it. All right, this red is so powerful. All right, now we're gonna go in around that and put in our burnt sienna. And now, because we did our map of the ear, we can kind of see where the main components go. So I'm just going to put in my burnt sienna. I'm going to put another layer over all these dark areas too. It's gonna look like a hot mess. Your painting will go through an ugly phase where you just think you've totally ruined it. But that is just part of painting watercolor and most painting processes in any medium, but I think especially watercolor, because just of the nature of how watercolor works, so don't get scared. And then while this is super, super wet, we can drop in another round of super, super dark. So I'm gonna get my French ultramarine mixed into very cream consistency, burnt sienna. I can even let some red seep in because that'll just make it more alive looking, which we like that. And my brush is full of super dark paint now. So I'm gonna use that as an opportunity to paint in my darks, which he's got a few little I did a lot more delicate painting in my full 3-hour length version of this that I just, I can't cover everything. So if you would like to watch the real time tutorial and paint along with me, or at least see the demo. It's a pretty advanced painting, really. But I do believe in the words, where there's a will, there's a way. So I'm gonna show this to y'all, and y'all can struggle with it and play with it and probably paint it more than one time. Do practice runs. Don't think that your first time painting this is going to be a success. This is a complicated thing to paint. Skin tones for any skin color, really. So I'm just going to put in another layer of these super darks while everything's really wet. But only when things are really wet will it work. And this lip is just gorgeous and dark down in here. So I'm going to drop that in. And look, it's already getting dry because I'm getting a hard edge there. So I'm going to go in with a damp brush and kind of blend it and pull that color out. And while this is still a little damp, I'm going to drop in. You want the lips to be pretty soft, so it's helpful to paint on damp paper. But these are more advanced techniques, just so you know. So don't get too mad at the process when it proves to be a little difficult for you. That is layer number 2. We're gonna let that dry. It's getting to the stage where we can't do much. We might be able to put in some chin details here because he does have a pretty dark chin. It's still retaining its soft edges for me for the most part. Look, I just made a mistake. He does not have a hairy chin. This is a child. So it happens. And this is really getting pretty dry. I'm gonna blend that. And we're gonna let that dry. All right, this is completely dry. I think I wanna put in a layer of Winsor Violet, but first I want to do a little bit of lifting because I want my Winsor Violet to show up on the eyelids. So I've got clean, clear water on this angled shader. You don't have to use an angled shader. You can use any, maybe you have some acrylic painting brushes. You can use those. And see, this is lifting really nice. And it's because I'm using, what am I using, y'all? I'm using non-staining paints. That's my secret. And look, we can lift out his highlight in his nose. And we look at the angle of that highlight, and it's very angled up, more than you would think. And it's very delicate. And look how realistic that's already starting to look with those lifting techniques. It's just really powerful way to get realism is use lifting. And this is the wrong, I shouldn't, see, I'm just having too much fun here. But I wanted to get that cleaner because I want the purple to show up. And if I paint the purple over it when there's a layer of burnt sienna there, the purple won't show up. You'll see what I mean in a minute when we paint it. And I want the purple to show up in here too. So I'm gonna refine some of these lighter areas that I want purple in. I want this to be purple. So I'm gonna lift back to the whiter paper and blot as needed. And then if you get a weird line after you blotted, you can just run over it, the whole area, across the whole area, and smooth out whatever blot lines you created that you don't want. Okay, so everything's pretty much dry. So guess what we're gonna do next? We're gonna put in some Winsor Violet. It's gonna be so pretty. All right, so I'm gonna get some pretty much tea consistency. And if I angled this up, it would drip readily. Oh, look, oh no, I made a mess. I don't want that stuff in there. All right, well, you're just gonna have to trust me. If I angle this up, it would run really fast. I'm gonna get it a little thicker because it will dry a lot lighter than you think it will. So I'm just gonna put a layer of purple tea consistency over all of this to create a beautiful purple glow in a lot of these areas. I'm gonna put it a little bit more powerfully and thicker in this area right here, because I remember that's what I did in the studio reel painting. Oh, that purple is just really pretty. And then, so I don't get any weird lines, I make sure the moisture extends everywhere. So now we have a really pretty purple leaning glow. And that's how I did it, y'all. That's how I did it in the actual painting, and it was just really gorgeous. I'm gonna augment this purple, or this red, while I have everything wet to make sure that red stays powerful. And some of this is dry, so I'm just blending it. And I'm gonna blend my edges here. But I do want that area to be a little bit lighter under his lip. I'm gonna drop more purple into this area. That I know is gonna be pretty dark. And I can even go in with cream consistency purple in these super dark areas, because you just can't get it too dark in these dark areas. All right. And then I'm going to drop in some milk consistency burnt sienna. See how I'm having to really work my paint and really get it blended up in the palette because I'm using straight from the tube. That's why I'm not a big fan of that. I'm dropping in some cream consistency, mostly burnt sienna, to blend with that purple. And I'm gonna put some burnt sienna in here too. You can only do this when everything's still really wet and I'm actually getting some pretty awkward edges. So I should stop. We're going into the buckling stage, and it's gonna start cauliflowering on me in the skin. And the other good thing about using these specific colors is they do not like to cauliflower. They will try their best not to cauliflower. And when you don't want paint to cauliflower, that's a really good thing. So this paint will help you not get cauliflowers. I'm gonna augment this purple because it's kind of, all right. So again, we're gonna let all this dry, and we're starting to see the glow created by painting in layers with these thick paints and letting them blend themselves on wet paper. I'm gonna go dry this. Now, this is at a stage where I'm happy with it, but you might have arrived to this stage after 2 or 3 layers and you still have areas that aren't rich enough, they don't glow enough, they're too medium toned as opposed to dark, or they're not glowing enough. You can continue to build up in layers like I've shown you to get the colors to the point of richness and depth that you want by continuing to paint a layer, let it dry, paint another layer, let it dry. I think mine is at a stage, just for this demonstration purpose, that I'm gonna be happy with it, but now it's just bugging me, even though this is not what this demonstration is about. I wanna show you how you can lift to bring in the realism, okay? And so I'm gonna lift out the highlights in the eye area. And I actually, in my Patreon tutorial, I put an actual eye with an eye glint in very delicately by lifting. So there's a lot you can do with lifting that is beyond the scope of this tutorial, because gosh, we're already into a half hour. All right, but because I use these beautiful colors that lift so well, even the Winsor Violet is just lifting like an absolute charm. All right, so I'm just showing you how we can pull this painting back from the abyss of ugly stage, because your painting will go through an ugly stage, I promise. And the trick is to get some lighter areas. You don't want everything all dark. You don't want everything all light, obviously. He's got these gorgeous light highlights in the architecture of his tendons and everything that I find so beautiful in his neck. And I really did a lot of work on this area in the studio version of this painting, and it just came out so pretty. But this is just a little rough here. Ugh. It's also, that's why you want to paint a little bit bigger so you can get these details in. You want to get your Rembrandt edges in. Be sure to watch my video about the Rembrandt edges. You can get it to this stage, and this is where you should spend another hour of fiddling. This is not done. Like, if I was going to make this a finished painting, I would fiddle with it. Like, I would lift, and then I would put in these little details, and I would keep going and keep working this painting until I got it. Like, I would wait for all this to dry and then put in this super dark ear hole area, and the super dark mouth line, the super dark nostril. You need to put that in to make this finished. So this is not finished at this stage, but this is where, at the stage where you could bring it to the finish line pretty easily by putting in the jewelry. I have a whole video about jewelry. Go check out my jewelry video. You got to know that if you're new to watercolor or any painting, really. But let me show you, just for example, what happens when you put in a super dark to finish off an area. I'm going to put in the super dark, and I'm going very slow and studying my reference. Look at that beautiful, beautiful lip. And you can just get some gorgeous realism by putting in these tiny little hair thin little pops of dark that just break your heart, but really bring a painting to its maturity. So a lot of beginners, they stop too soon before they give a chance to the painting to really mature by putting in these little details that take like at least an hour on a painting like this. It just takes time to put in. See, I can't stop now because it's just such an exciting stage of the painting. So I encourage you to give your painting a chance, you know, and don't stop too soon thinking you've lost control. You haven't lost control. You just need to keep working your painting, work the plan. A lot of beginners join my Patreon and they get frustrated, so I might not be the best instructor for you to go with if you're a beginner. Look at that pretty eyelash. Ugh. But his lips, look at his lips. Let me show you a close-up of how beautiful his lips look because of the details I put in his lips. It's just so pretty. It's worth it to put in those details. Painting, especially a black portrait, look how stark these edges are. I highly recommend you learn about the windmill principle. And look, when this is dry like this, you can go in. I just can't stand not telling y'all about this. It's so, you know, this is how my tutorials are too. I mean, this is something you need to know no matter what you paint. The windmill principle will help, you know, in the shadow areas. You can create your dark on dark edge and it won't look like such a freaking cutout. And look, it's reactivating, and a beginner might freak out about that, but if it reactivates too much and you don't want that much of a lost edge later, you can go in here and repaint. After this is dry, refine this edge, okay? But you need a dark edge to attach him into the painting. So, and this is really reactivating a lot, and that is okay. You can totally go in later and refine this edge. You know how to do it now with cream consistency. Just find that edge again. Okay, and then leave this really stark. It's just, it's so beautiful. I might have to finish this painting because it is so, it's so pretty. I don't know if it's translating to pretty on video, but it's just gorgeous. And then there's these beautiful fronds pointing down to his face. Just love it. All right, so, ugh, what a mess I have because I used that paint. But this is all really dark in here. Dark, dark, dark. I feel like I have some sizing issues too with this very old paper that I just used for this demonstration. So just know if you get blotchy areas like what seems to be developing here, it's not you. It might be your paper is old, or you got too much humidity on it, or that happens a lot to me in my, oops, I don't want yellow there really. It might just be humidity in your climate. I'm just having too much fun with this tutorial. I don't want to say goodbye to y'all, but I should say goodbye. This has gotten really long and most of you stopped watching. So, oh my gosh, love these. Like, I mean, this hat's so fun to play, paint. These little fronds that are like, love these. It's got like, I painted these a lot more controlled, but in the real painting, it's fun to play when it's not a serious painting. That's why studies are so important. Actually, this quinacridone gold would be pretty. Make some fronds with the quinacridone gold. We can clean up this edge and soften it. And down here in this area, it's not very important, so we can even bring some of this, you know, soften this edge a little, make it dreamy in this non-important area. I kind of lost control of that, but I can go back in and repaint that, can I? We know we can. How about some little happy splashes of yellow to signify the energy emanating off this beautiful boy. That's his energy. To make it a pretty painting, to finish it. I'm gonna go dry this. I can't stop now. I love it. Okay, this is buckling, and I just love to put, let's see if this will cauliflower for us. I'm gonna see if the hat will cauliflower. So I'm just putting a few sprinkles in the hat to see if it will cauliflower out. And then this area is dry, so I can refine this edge if I want. I'm gonna do a really milk consistency, just a real milk consistency burnt sienna to find that edge. And then he's got these little shapes, just gorgeousness in his. So I'm just gonna refine some of these areas. And just tea consistency. Just smooth some of this out with a milk to tea consistency burnt sienna. Oh, it is cauliflowering. See, that's one thing about whole binaureolin, it doesn't cauliflower, but this burnt sienna mixed with quinacridone gold is cauliflowering a little, which is such a cool effect for this wild hat. And then, see, the hat's still wet, so if you want to push this even more to a finished painting, you can go in and put in the super dark little edges between the... I got a dot of paint there, so I can't actually paint that. This is pretty dry. The slats. I can't stop, y'all. I love this painting. There's these beautiful, and see here, like I said, if you want to refine, I would say don't make it too dark, but maybe with milk consistency, refine his back just a little bit. I could even paint this with a Winsor violet. I'm gonna go dry this. One thing, I feel like this isn't balanced now because there's purple over here and nothing over here. And you want a light on light Rembrandt edge, remember. For those of you who are followers of my channel, you know what I mean. So I'm gonna put in a very, very tea consistency, and this serves the purpose of popping out this gorgeous light. So this is gonna create light on your painting by having a very light tea consistency edge here, and then I'm going to blend it out because I want these dots to show off. So I just wanted to put a little bit of balance, and also I'll bring it right down and underneath the hat because there's a shadow in the hat, so you can put purple shadow in the hat. That all of a sudden now you have gorgeous light on this painting because the light's hitting in the hat, and this purple is making the yellow glow, and it's just happy, happy painting now. Now it's super dry. You can go in and you can spend as much time as you want with things like the details in this painting. There's, you know, there's these basket weave in the hat. So I'm just like really not putting a lot of time into that because I don't want this to look too finished, but you can do as much as you want to add as much realism as you want for your painting and whatever it is you're painting. But for the good of everyone and not to make this too long, I will stop there. And I think this painting does deserve a little signature. I do feel like I'm getting a little blotchiness from the sizing maybe. See, that's this, you see the sizing in the paper? That might not, you might see that in your paper. That means your paper's too old or the sizing went bad. And in my humid climate, I get that problem all the time. So that's always happening to me, especially with the arch. Okay, so you would want to dry this completely. Do more little, I would definitely do more lifting in here and put more ear details and maybe put in the eye detail. I mean, I could keep working on this for an hour now and really make it a stellar painting, but I don't want to exhaust you guys. I get obsessed and I just can't stop. I was just going to show you skin, but look, I showed you pretty much the whole painting. Hopefully at a more beginner-friendly style. My 3-hour tutorial, it got pretty advanced, but you will learn a lot, beginners, if you watch that. All my tutorials are full of information that will advance your skills so much faster if you watch those tutorials and try them at least, than if you just stick to really simple beginner tutorial. I'll put a link here that you can go look at my library and see what I have to see if you want to join my Patreon. Or if not, you can just buy this individual tutorial on my website. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much to my viewers who give me likes. Please leave me a like. That tells the algorithm you love me. Really helps me grow my channel and bring you more free content. Someday I hope all my content can be free, but right now I'm making absolutely nothing on my YouTube channel. All my income comes from my Patreon, so I really depend on that right now to pay the bills. That's my main money. So anyway, thank you for that. But thank you also for liking this video. Thank you for leaving me a comment and talking to me in the comments. And I encourage you to do that because I like to do that. And also it tells the algorithm you're interested in my content. So that actually helps me too, if you at least come say hi. So please come say hi. And I'd love to chat with you there. And now go watercolor your world. Bye, everybody.